I was wounded on paralyzed from my mid-chest down 48 years ago, almost half a century. I've been in a wheelchair now because of that war, and I'm grateful for every day that I wake up every day and get into my wheelchair. I'm so thankful to be alive. Having said that, I was wounded. I was 21 years old, and it was devastating for me, initially, both emotionally and physically. The first VA hospital I was in was the Bronx Veterans Administration Hospital in New York. I had grown up on Long Island, and the Bronx VA, the conditions were atrocious, overcrowded conditions, rats on the ward, men pushing call buttons for aides who would never come, and eventually Life magazine did a May 1970 an expose on the Bronx VA, in particular our spinal cord injury wards. The title of the piece was Our Forgotten Wounded. So I was dealing with that from the very beginning, and when I came out to California, as I mentioned in Hurricane Street, I thought thousands of miles away, I'm coming out to California, it's got to be different than it was in the Bronx, what I went through and what I had to endure, and the others around me. Some of the most severely wounded of the war, we were just wanted to be treated like human beings, and I just couldn't understand at first, when I first came home from the war, why the place was so depressing, why people were not helping us, and they were spending millions, if not trillions of dollars on some of the most technologically advanced weaponry of that war, and they couldn't seem to care for some of the most severely injured who had come home. So when I came out to California, I thought, well, it's got to be different. But what I found at the Long Beach VA was the conditions were as bad, if not worse, than the Bronx VA. And I found myself, I fell and I had a bed sore, which is always a challenge for paraplegics, and I ended up in the hospital. I was on a gurney for 93 days, and it was during that period that I realized that there were others like me and others who were complaining about the conditions. And what happened was we decided, reluctantly at first, decided to do to go to Senator Kranz's office at 11,000 Wilshire Boulevard, the federal building, and we made a caravan up there, and we decided, I encouraged the men, I told them we were going to do a sit-in for one day. Actually, we were going to meet with the senator, then go out to lunch. We ended up sitting in for one night, and that eventually evolved into a hunger strike, which was to become a national story. The irony of that, if I could just say quickly, the absurdity of it all was that here you had some of the most severely wounded of the war who had returned from Vietnam, these young men, 19 and 20, 21-year-old paralyzed veterans, quadriplegics and paraplegics, laying on mattresses on a United States Senator's office, risking their lives again, sacrificing themselves, going without food for 17 days. That's how long that strike lasted. And these men who had risked their lives in Vietnam were now risking their lives again in a senator's office here, where they should have been cared for properly. To me, as I look back upon it, it still seems a bit absurd that we had to go to such extremes to be treated with respect. And I always felt this was a story I had to tell, because I always felt it was an important story, that these men who felt beaten down and defeated, who felt a part of this outrageous, what would the word be, outrageous, misdirected misadventure in Vietnam, would actually take this step, do this sit-in, reluctantly get involved, and suddenly realize, be empowered by this, and changed by this experience, and to eventually have a victory in the midst of a time when the country was so polarized and split, and when those who had been wounded in the war wondered, what had I sacrificed my body for?